Welcome back to my garage. Today we're going to talk about my trusty little Honda Shadow. I guess it's not that little, it's a 500-pound bike. But in the world of cruisers, it's definitely middleweight. So I've owned this bike for about 7 years. And one thing I've grown to love, it always starts up. You keep the battery full on this guy, well charged. Change the oil once in a while, every once in a while, maybe once a year is a good average. And the rest, well, you don't have to worry about the rest. I've owned this bike for about 7 years. I bought it used with 20,000 miles. It now has 26,079 miles. And all I can really say about this bike is that it's given me almost zero trouble. I also think it's one of the more well-balanced bikes that I own. Like, I love my Triumph, but it's top heavy. And when I take corners, I don't have the same confidence because of that gigantic front wheel and just the overall large suspension. The Street Twin right here next to me under the cover. Also a pretty nice balanced machine, but it just sits forward a little bit more like a sporty bike. This guy, I'm just sitting back. My butt is contoured into the seat, straight upright, almost a 90-degree bend in the knees. Obviously the monkey is the monkey. It's comfy, but it's tiny. One thing I can say about this bike though, it is cold-blooded. Like, here's my idle, right? If I want to start going, it raises that idle right up. Today's pretty tempered though, so it seems like it's pretty warm. Alright, let's take a little Philly cruise and talk a bit more about the Shadow. So this bike is OEM. I did nothing to it. I put some nice tires on it, some Metzler 888s, because honestly for years this was my commuter. It was the only bike I owned for a long time. I know now I have several bikes, but mostly it's because I now have the means to own several bikes. I did not always have the means. For one, I own 2 bikes. My girlfriend owns 2 bikes. She just puts me on the insurance for her 2 bikes as I do with her, so we can ride as much as we want. That's one reason. Also, I used to always live in a smaller space. I was a little bit more concerned about street parking. As I've grown older, I've just realized everybody has these gigantic cars. They're allowed to take up a bunch of space on the sidewalk or on the street. Why can't I? I'm parking my motorcycles there, and I don't feel bad about it. So I owned this bike for a long time. All I've done, honestly, brake pads, tires, a new battery at one point, because they go every once in a while. I just recently did the fork seals, so I got some fresh seals and some new fork oil. But other than that, I haven't had to replace anything on this bike. It's super basic, it's just a standard tack. I got a neutral light, I got a check engine light, I got a gas light, not a gas gauge. So there's honestly not much to go wrong with it. That's a good thing when you just leave your bike outside in the elements for years on end in a city where people hit them with cars. This bike has been hit by cars, and it survived it. But yeah, we sit here at a wet weight of over 500 pounds, light 500, 510, something like that. But once you get going, you don't feel it. I mean, this thing just really, it's got such a nice balance to it. I think it's my favorite bike to take corners on. I like this guy in the twisties, it's a good twisty kind of bike. Obviously there's no wind protection. This is very much your boulevard cruiser. But I live in this urban environment. The speed limit on this road right now is 25 miles per hour. So I don't feel the need to have any wind protection. 745 degree or 745 cc engine, V-twin. Anybody who knows about V-twins knows that that's a pretty small V-twin for a 500-pound bike. But what I will say is this thing goes down the road. Not only does it go down the road, but I got a I can't really see it in my mirror, but I have a sissy bar on here for passengers. I've had so many passengers on this bike over the years. Like, I work in restaurants downtown here in Philadelphia, and you know, we get off late at night, we want to hang out because we have our little community of, you know, midnight social hours, and I'll just like hit up a friend at another restaurant, go pick him up, throw him on the back of the bike, dude ride style, ride down somewhere, maybe get a drink. I've done that for years. I've had a guy on the back of this bike that 6'5", weighs 220 plus, and the bike handled it just fine. What I will say though is keep some air pressure in that back tire, because if you throw an extra 250 pounds in the back of this guy, your back tire is going to go bald real fast. I learned my lesson that way, but it was alright. It was time for new tires anyway. It's got some get up and go too. First, second, and third gear on this bike are super fun. Fourth gear, fifth gear on the freeway leaves something to be desired, but I mean, that just kind of comes with it. This isn't really meant to be on the freeway passing people at 80 miles per hour. Honestly, once you get to 80 miles per hour, the wind's hitting you so darn hard, you don't really want to be there anyway. I did put some adapters on the handlebars to pull them back. Honestly, that's not for me. If they were up to me, I probably would have put them back, but I trained my girlfriend how to ride on this bike when she was upgrading from her Monkey before she bought her Street Twin, and she did pretty darn good on this. It was just a little too wide right here. You know, you got this big air box, and she's fairly short, 5'3", and she was really having trouble with the low speed stuff, specifically parking, backing it up. She could almost never back it up, and I would have to help her a lot. So I put the bars back to help her with the riding part, and ultimately this was going to kind of be her next bike, but after much consideration she decided she wanted to try something a little bit more slender, a little bit more lower. The Street Twin offers about an inch less on the seat height, and also it's about 50 pounds lighter. Not to say that she went from the Monkey to a 900cc Bonneville is like, that's a pretty big jump, and she knew it, but the idea behind it was that she wouldn't be feeling the need to upgrade again in a year. If you're going to spend the money, spend it once. It's a nice overcasty day here in Philly today. Probably about 60 degrees. I'm in full gear. This is honestly my favorite temperature to ride in because I prefer full gear. I know I'm just riding down the street here like going 20 miles per hour, and you know, obviously I don't necessarily need full gear. To some people, I always feel the need to be in full gear. I wear it to work every day, but you know, there's just crazy people on these roads. At any given time somebody could pull out in front of me. I could go sliding down on the pavement. I don't care if I'm going 20 or 200. A slide is a slide. And I got my anti-slide garments on. Got some padding in here too. The back protector's a must. The only place I'm cheaping out is the gloves. I still, having a motocross background, I love my thin gloves. They'll do something, but you know, obviously these are going to rip real quick. Oh, that kind of brings me to a good point. One thing I love about this bike, you know, Philadelphia has mad potholes. I've talked about it before. I can stand up like no problem on this bike when I need to because I have these mid-mount foot pegs. If I had those forward cruisers, it would be a real pain in the butt to stand up and not take that shock to the back. See, third gear is fun. There's some good up and go in third gear. Case in point. Oh yeah, take that bump, no problem. So the thing I really love about having this as one of my longer motorcycle experiences is I bought this bike when I was just like a cook, right? So I'm a chef now, But I was a cook for years, taking my time to learn the ropes. I was making like $14 an hour, tops. And I was able to finance this bike and pay it off so easily because it cost me $3,700 to buy it used. I know that, you know, Honda Shadow might not be the sexiest name in motorcycling, but we'll take some still shots of this around the end of our trip, and you'll see it's a pretty handsome motorcycle. And at that cost, I mean, you can't really beat it. It's given me so little maintenance issues. The overhead was extremely affordable. I carried low insurance in terms of theft and stuff because nobody wants to steal this bike. I carry much higher insurance on my Triumph because that bike is, it's attractive. You know, I could see somebody going after that, but I leave this one out on the street for 12 hours at a time when I'm parked downtown for work, and I never worry about it. I worry about people running into it because, you know, people just suck at driving, but I definitely don't worry about the theft, and that's a really nice thing. So it cost me under $4,000, it cost me about $120 a year to insure it. Gas mileage is pretty darn good too. I'd put it somewhere in the 55 to 65 range depending on the style of riding you're doing. We got City Hall right here. I love this building. It's just like so impressive. Every little bit of architecture. You could look at a different piece of it every time you pass by. But yeah, I've had a lot of trouble with the idea of getting rid of this bike. I've been toying with it a lot lately. Mostly because I just own so many at this point that it just feels obnoxious. But I also love it. Like, between this and the Monkey, what I like to take to work. I only take the Triumph on days when I know I want to go for a ride afterwards. Because other than that, it's just, it's a little too nice to be leaving out on the streets. You know, I work in a decent neighborhood. I basically work in this neighborhood a little south of here. So it's, you know, it's a good district, but that doesn't mean that people aren't going to come in and try to steal your bike just because it's a nice district. If anything, that's a more attractive reason because they know that's where the nice stuff is. And, you know, it's something that I keep in the back of my mind. So yeah, as far as technology goes, this bike has the least amount of stuff possible. I have one button over here. I can press it for mileage, time, and trip. And that's about it. I usually just leave it on time because I don't need to see anything else. The time is the most useful bit of information it could give me. You know, I got my high beams, turn signals, got a little horn. Pretty cute little horn, if I might add. On-off switch, start button. That's it. And honestly, I think there's something beautiful about that. It's kind of what motorcycling's about, right? Alright, guys. One thing that I can say about urban, well, I'm not going to call commuting because I'm out for a joyride, but just urban riding in general, you got to be patient. People are always going to jump in front of you, stop in front of you, do whatever they really want to, honestly, because it's just kind of how people are. And you just don't want to get too hot-headed about it. I'm having a good time doing it. People watching, the people of the city. That's how motorcycling, I mean, really started. It wasn't always about going 200 miles per hour or being super flashy. It was just kind of about riding through and enjoying the wind in your face. Right, so let's talk about this a little bit. Obviously, this bike is about 10 years old now. Originally made in 2010, so like 12, 13 years old, honestly. I think it's held up great. I mean, it really is timeless. You can't say that this is not a classic motorcycle. And you certainly can't say it's not beautiful. That V-twin, blacked out engine, chain drive, twin rear shock suspension. Like, sure, there's specs that aren't good. It has a rear drum brake. The front brakes aren't that great, but it's a cruiser compared to a Harley, and honestly, they're all the same. It's just got that classic style. Twin exhaust coming out the side. One big gripe I've always had, this airbox just sticks out, but you just get used to it. You get used to just kind of riding with your leg out. I think that's just part of being on a cruiser. The C-Bar has brought me so much joy. I can't even say how many people I've had on the back of this bike. Now, riding with the passenger comes with its own challenges, but having this sissy bar here makes the passenger so much more comfortable. Between that, some foot pegs, these little bit of extra side something just for them to have that extra little bit of security so they're not looking right over the side. It's always made things a lot nicer. Something I think Honda does really well, their mirrors are so good. I love how low it is. It's like just under my hands, but it gives me perfect visibility. Everything I could want to see, it's right there and available. Cute little gas tank. It does not offer a huge range, but it definitely fits the sculpture of the bike. I don't like a big chunky gas tank anyway, and it's not like a little peanut on a Sportster or something. This brings me to a point. One of the reasons why I even wanted to make a review about this bike, obviously this bike's 12 years old. You know, most people are watching reviews on brand new stuff, but there's two classes of used motorcycles that I see so many of on Craigslist and on Facebook Marketplace and Auto Trader, Cycle Trader. Sportsters and Shadows. They are a dime a dozen, and although I think super highly of my Shadow, it's a watered down model. There's millions of them out there. You can get them so cheap. You know, I could resell this bike right now for probably $3 to $4 grand, and like, sure, it's 12 years old and it doesn't sound like the biggest value, but $3 to $4 grand doesn't buy you very much these days. And this is a bike that's going to give you no trouble. Even in 26,000 miles, I am so confident that with the right maintenance, mostly just the right care, you don't even need to maintain it much. Keep air in the tires, check the brake fluid, you know, change the oil, and you got yourself a machine that's going to last you a long time. Let's take a little spin up Kelly Drive. First try, never fails. Honestly, this has a pretty darn good sound for a stock exhaust too. I've always thought it sounds great. Thought about upgrading the exhaust, but honestly, I like to kind of keep things quiet. Living in the city, we're just all up on each other all the time. There's no reason to be more than you need to be.